Hello everybody, it's Sarah and I'm back to wrap up the last couple of weeks of October. I apologize for my voice. I've been really sick. This cold has kicked my butt, but I cannot not film anymore because I have a lot of books that I've read and I need to wrap them up so I can move on with my reading life somehow. It's making me very anxious to not wrap up my books. So I put on a little lipstick and a little, hopefully I'm not too ugly for you. And I am going to finish wrapping up October. I noticed in my last review, my part 1, I don't think I wrapped up the first book that I actually read in October, which was Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. So I'll rectify that right now, I guess. I think most people know the story of Frankenstein. To be honest, I was incredibly surprised at how much I really loved the book. I've never read it before, and it brought up a lot of questions, and I wasn't expecting to question that much while I read it. It's a very short book. I also loved the formatting of it, how it was like looking through different windows and then coming back out. It was very, very, very interesting. And I came out not really liking Victor Frankenstein very much, and feeling quite a bit of sympathy for the monster, but not enough because he was an incredibly intelligent being, and to go on a rampage like that, knowing better for vengeance and getting feelings of knowing he was that intelligent a being and going and killing people and wreaking havoc kind of destroyed the feelings that I had for him. But overall, I was incredibly surprised by this book. I really liked it. And I think I gave it 4 stars. So now I have wrapped up the beginning of October already, and then I also did a separate wrap up for Dewey's 24-hour readathon. So the rest of this wrap up is going to be, I believe, from the 23rd to the 31st, and I read quite a few books. Again, I'm off on leave from work because of the broken finger, so I have a lot of time to read. Now, the first book I'm going to wrap up, I don't know if it was the first book I read, but Making Your Mind Up. I don't know why I even bother showing this. You can't even see it. By Jill Mansell. She is a chick lit author from the UK, and I really enjoy her books, generally speaking. They're a little bit more meaty than some chick lit books out there. A few of hers are not as meaty, but most of them are. There's generally a lot of characters in them, and it's interesting how you don't know how these characters end up intertwining until midway through the book. They end up interacting and oh my goodness, they know each other. Shocking. So this one is about, for the most part, 6 different couples or becoming couples living in a certain town in the UK, and it follows their falling in love, falling out of love, they're divorced, they're still, it's a whole lot of fun. I enjoyed this book tremendously. It was one of her good ones. I also like how she writes characters that I don't particularly like. I think all of her characters are different characters. They're not cookie cut characters either. They're very realistic people. Lottie, I think, was one of the characters, and I did not like her. She was just not my thing, but I still wanted to read. I still did read, and she got her ending however it was. She also writes some very precocious children, which is kind of fun too. I love a little precocious child. So I gave this one 4 stars. It was very enjoyable and took me kind of out of my reading slump a little bit, so yippee for that. Then we have this book, This Too Shall Pass, by Milena Busque. I don't know whether she is French or so. She's Spanish, so I'm not really sure how to pronounce her name. This book I won in a Goodreads giveaway, so thank you to the publisher who sent this to me earlier this year. And I'm gonna tag this review as I give an honest review. So this book is in a first-person narrative about a 40-year woman. It starts with at her mother's funeral, and I read up to page 50 of this book, which is a good chunk of it because it's only 100 pages, and I had to put this down. I hated this woman. This was like a first-person whine from start to finish. She has no morals. She has no anything. It was incredibly depressing to watch her life and to think that that's what... No, I just could not. No. There's also 0 quotation marks in this book, which was incredibly irritating to me. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I hated it. I put it on the DNF shelf. I did not rate it at all because, like with stars, because I don't do that. I just throw them on my DNF shelf. I did not like it. And I was kind of sad because I thought this was going to be a cute, like, chick lit kind of book. And I mean, it's got a woman with a hat on the cover, and I had seen it and I had read the synopsis and it looked good, and no, just no. So for my Back to the Classics 2016 challenge, which I am slightly behind on, I read a couple of books this month. The first one was The Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury. This book was not what I expected either. I mean, it kind of speaks for itself. The title does, The Martian Chronicles. It's about Martians, and it's a science fiction because it's Ray Bradbury, so like, hello. But every chapter was its own little story. We didn't follow characters through the whole book. Until the end, you kind of saw a few people relating to each other. And this book is basically about Martians who live on Mars, like an actual race of humanoid type beings, and the Earth colonization of Mars, killing out all of those Martians, then things happening on the Earth and them abandoning Mars and going back to Earth, and then the recolonization of Mars by Earth people. Yeah. This wrap-up is not going how I wanted it to. So this book was incredibly weird. It was kind of interesting to read, though, because this was written before humans had even gone to the moon or left the atmosphere. So to see what he thought was going to be happening in the future was actually pretty interesting, because the future that he's saying is getting very close. This is like 2030 through 2050. So, and it's kind of interesting how he took like the 1940s, 1950s family values, and you can totally see them on Mars, even though it's the future. So anyway, it was a very weird book, but I kind of enjoyed it once I read it, and I have no idea what I rated it. So for one of my book clubs that's on Goodreads, I think in November, they're supposed to be reading Lady Susan, so I read it the end of this month, and this is by Jane Austen, and it is written in letter format, and it is about, oh my goodness, is she an evil woman? Lady Susan is nasty. This was not an incredibly funny book, but I am shocked that Jane Austen can write such a villainous character. I kind of like it. And her poor daughter, who she pays no attention to and is trying to marry off to this man, and she is a flirt and manipulative, and no one likes her. And it's all written through correspondence, and I thoroughly enjoyed this book. It is another, I liked it. It was very different from Jane Austen's other novels, and I recommend that people do it. I mean, it's definitely different than her other work, so be prepared that this is not like happy-go-lucky. I mean, this is really from the eyes of a pretty nasty woman. Anyway, I think I gave this 4 stars. And it's very, very, I mean, it's short as well. It really only took me about 2 or 3 hours to read 100% because it is in letter format. So round out your Jane Austen. If you've read everything but that, do pick it up because it's definitely different from her other works. I also picked up Etiquette and Espionage by Gail Carriger. This is the first book in the Finishing School series. This is the young adult series that takes place 25 years prior to her Parasol Protectorate series. I read that last year, earlier this year, somewhere in there, and I loved it. It was a lot of fun, and I loved this because this takes place in a fun boarding school type atmosphere filled with very smart, cunning girls. And if you've ever seen my review of other books like, I don't know, the Gallagher Girls series, you know that I am a sucker for this stuff. This was fantastic. I loved it from start to finish. It is a steampunk novel, and there are some elements of the supernatural, but not nearly as much as is in the Parasol Protectorate series. The only thing I can say is you have to read, even though this takes place 25 years before it, you need to read her books in publication order. So you need to read the Parasol Protectorate series before you read this, because this has spoilers. You will be spoiled for that series if you read this series first. Do not do it. Okay, read that one first, then this one. Now I need to get all the rest of them from the library and binge read. I feel the need to binge read. They're so good. The last book I read in the month, but not the last book I'm going to wrap up, I read, finally, The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. Holy crap. This book spoke to me somehow. I do not know how. I don't know why. I mean, this book spoke to me. I loved every page of it. I loved it. This is a 5-star read for me. I did not expect that going into this book. This book made me think. It made me think about how I perceive people and how I could be completely wrong. And this is an important book. I think that people should read it because it really touched me a lot. I cried a few tears. It's very well paced. The action, it moves very well. I think I read it in one sitting. I did not put it down, and I loved it. And I don't know if I'm explaining myself very well, but I really loved this book. I was incredibly surprised. I did not expect to love it. I've never even seen the movie. Where have I been? What have I done with my life up till now? What is this? Oh, my goodness. I've got a lot of work to do now. Now I'm gonna wrap up kind of my Victober sort of deal. If you remember, Victober was reading Victorian literature, and I have a lot of things to say about all of this. But I did finish Great Expectations by Charles Dickens, and I read it so hard that my book died. And this book follows the life of Pip from childhood to adulthood and his crazy love with Estella, which I totally didn't understand, and about him having great expectations, and it's a bit of a mystery. You don't know where his great expectations are coming from. It's also a warning that sometimes money and all of that is not for the good. And I liked that. I thoroughly enjoyed Dickens' writing. I loved it. I really did. And it made me want to read more of his works, and I hope to next year. Now, this took me a lot longer to finish than I expected it to. I binge read the last part of it the day before Dewey's 24-hour readathon. So did I wrap this up already? I don't think I did wrap it up. Anyway, I finished it up before Dewey's 24-hour readathon, and that was essentially 3 weeks into the month. So the lesson that I've learned here is that I enjoy reading classics and that I really enjoy their stories, but that they require time for me because I need to read them in little chunks and really let them sink into me somehow. And I think that's the way they were written, and they're meant to be read in a way, because if you think about what sorts of entertainment there were back in the 1800s, they didn't have TV. They didn't have things. So you would want a book to last a long time. You would want to, enjoy every page of the book and really let it sink in. So I'm not going to beat myself up over that. It's kind of just an observation of how I need to read. I also partially listened to this on audiobook while I was going to and from places, and I also liked that because, of course, that does slow you down quite a bit. That's kind of where we're at with that. I enjoyed it. I think I gave it 4 stars, and I look forward to reading some more of Dickens. Also for Victober, this was kind of surprise Victober, and I think this is a Victorian novel because it was written in 1899. So people could totally correct me because I know there's a little bit of discrepancy whether or not, or a little bit of I couldn't really figure out whether it was only books that are, you know, UK books that are considered Victorian literature, or if it does kind of extend out. And I read Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. It's actually a book club read. And Joseph Conrad, I believe, is from Poland, but he wrote exclusively in English, and he, you know, emigrated to the UK. So I don't know, maybe it could be a Victorian read. And this book was okay. It's really intense, and a lot of people had some really interesting things to say in my book club about this book, because I had no idea that people thought he was racist and stuff. Well, let me tell you, this is all about how evil the white people are to go and colonize and enslave the Black people in Africa. I mean, it's awful. It's an awful book. I think most of us kind of have an idea of how awful this time period was in the colonization and all of these. I mean, it was awful. It was awful what white people did back then. I don't know if I can say I liked this book because it was awful. The content was like, it was awful. It was an awful book. So I kind of didn't know what to rate this book because it was shocking and awful and yet good. So I think I kind of went with the 3-star thing. I'm glad it's off my list of books to read. I have been enlightened, I guess I could say. Yay! So I'm counting this for Victober because why not? I only read about 28 pages of The Woman in White. I still have a lot to go on that, and I don't even have the book down here to show you. So 28 pages of The Woman in White for Victober, and I will continue reading it, and I'm liking it. So, but as I said with the Dickens, it's gonna take me a while to get through it because I'm reading head, it's not processing. It takes me a few chapters to get into the language and whatever, but it's all good. So I did that. So Victober was good. For Shakes Along, I was a day late to Shakes Along, but I did read Macbeth, and I did really enjoy reading Macbeth. I mean, I'm not a fan of Shakespeare's tragedies so much, but it really was kind of fun to read this and then see what people were putting on Twitter and stuff. Again, I was a day late, so I didn't get involved in the discussion, so I can't really speak to the actual readathon itself this month. But I did throw out a couple things, and let me tell you, I forget her name now, who's doing it. She got right back to me because all I could think of was like the 1600 C-section. Holy crap, he was not born a woman. Holy mackerel. So we had a good back and forth about, yes, the medieval cesarean, and there's some very interesting pictures about that on the internet if you want to go. And I mean, yeah, anyway, so it seems like that is that for this month. So I will see you again. I'm assuming I'm probably going to do 2 wrap-ups again next month because I'm reading Kids Lit, at least for the first 2 weeks. And Kids Lit goes pretty quickly. So I'm assuming I'm going to have quite a few books for next month, although maybe not, because I'm going to be back to work. We'll see how that goes. Anyway, we'll talk to you later. We'll see what I end up coming up with, and I hope that everyone is doing well. Bye!